is Jocelyn Fry.
Helena.
Chaundra.
I served with my family in the Democratic Republic of Congo for 9 years.
In Angola.
In Uganda for 6 years.
Missionaries do what God has called them to do, and you are a missionary if you are a child of God.
Help reach isolated people.
And that's why I think it's so important that we all are where we are.
Welcome to the final installment of our summer Limitless series. My name is Jocelyn Fry, and I'm excited to be your host tonight. I am blessed to share my own story with you this time, and so I'll introduce myself a little bit later. If this is your first time joining us for these events, you should notice that there's a question and answer chat box at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to, throughout the evening, to type any questions that you might have. Even throughout the presentations, and there'll be a time for questions and answers at the end, and we'll answer them live at the very end. If you can, add your email address to your questions so that just in case if we don't have time to get to your questions, we'll contact you with the answers later. Joining me live at the end to help answer questions will be Chaundra Edgar, who will be meeting in just a few minutes, as well as Ray Snaith, our recruiting manager. Women play a huge part in the MAF ministry and are an important part of the body of Christ. That's why we want to share the stories behind the airplanes and runways that you may see so often portrayed. The work that we are involved in supporting, encouraging, teaching, and doing have far-reaching impacts in the places we serve. 1 Corinthians 12-14 says, "There is one body, but it has many parts. But all its many parts make up one body. It is the same with Christ. We are all baptized by one Holy Spirit, and so we are formed into one body. It didn't matter whether we are Jews or Gentiles, slaves or free people, we are all given the same Spirit to drink. So the body is not made up of just one part, it has many parts." In the last two parts of our series, we have heard the stories of women serving in technical aviation, on-the-ground ministries, serving their communities, overcoming stigmas, and leading by example. And the stories of women who are ministering and empowering to the isolated and showing God's love in the places they are, with the gifts and the passions God has equipped them. We are so excited to share 3 more stories tonight from 3 more incredible women, and are so thankful that you have made the time to join us in celebrating the amazing work that is happening through MAF staff around the world. If you are not able to join us for part 1 or part 2, I would encourage you that it's available to watch on our YouTube channel, which we will link in the chat below at the end of the evening. And without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce our first feature, Chaundra Edgar. She grew up hearing missionary stories and fell in love with the passion and adventure that went along with serving others. She moved along with her husband, Matt, and 3 children to serve in Uganda, where Matt was a pilot for 6 years, and Chaundra fell in love with writing and telling stories of the missionaries and the people that MAF served. This led to her working in communications for a partner organization there working with refugees. After transitioning back to Canada in March of 2020, Chaundra took on the role with the MAF Canada Home Office and continues to passionately tell stories of those serving and being impacted by MAF's work across the globe. In her role of development, support, and resource assistant, Chaundra is one of the main people that has put together this Limitless series. So let's hear more from her in her own words.
Hi, my name is Chaundra Edgar, and I work for the MAF Home Office in Canada. My family served in Uganda for 6 years. My husband, Matt, was pilot there, and we have 3 children. Fred, who is almost 14, Charlotte, who's nearly 12, and Theo, who is 8 years old. When I was a kid, I came from a family that really appreciated the value of overseas missions. We grew up in a house where our bedtime stories were actually missionary tales of my dad and uncle smuggling Bibles through the Iron Curtain. You know, just treks across Europe with a caravan with the walls lined with Bibles. And as a kid, I thought those were the most exciting stories I had ever heard. And it really gave me a passion for helping people and furthering God's kingdom or God's love through this kind of adventure. And I think we learned at a young age that adventure and being a Christian kind of go hand in hand. And so for me, when I got older and I met Matt and he came home with this package from MAF Canada and said to me, "So what do you think about moving overseas?" And I could fly there. At first I was a little bit hesitant, like, where did this kind of came out of left field? But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, like, yeah, this is it. This is the adventure that I have been waiting for since I was a kid. That this is our chance to do something together as a family, and it's also our chance to make a difference for what we believe in and put our money where our mouths are. So when we arrived in Uganda, we didn't really know what to expect as a family. Matt's role was really defined. He was a pilot. He was going to be flying. He was going to be transporting other missionaries and aid workers and supplies. And he kind of knew what his life would look like, although different than here in Canada. His role was laid out for him, where when I arrived in Uganda, mine wasn't. And it was a little bit hard to figure out what's my purpose here. Like, we came as a family, we have a common calling, we have a common passion for being here and serving people in Uganda. What does life look like for me and the kids? I've always told the kids before we moved to Uganda, and now that we're back in Canada, life looks different here than it did on the mission field because I've always told them, like, you don't have to move across the world to be a missionary. You don't have to do something that you would read about in a book, let's say. It doesn't have to be like the stories I heard growing up. I think to be a missionary, all you have to do is be brave enough to step outside your front door. There's always going to be someone within your reach who needs help and who might need a helping hand, or just an opportunity, or to hear an encouraging word. That's all it takes, is to be brave enough to step outside your front door. As we got connected in Uganda and more comfortable there, navigating the country and the culture and the crazy traffic, we started to get involved in different ministries through our MAF office and some connections there. We were able to start working and ministering with a group of special needs moms and parents and other siblings and caregivers. And because we moved to Uganda with a daughter who has some pretty significant special needs, I think that was something that was really close to my heart, and something that it was natural to me to be able to encourage other people and talk about, like, Charlie's life is just as important as everybody else's. We would hear stories about, kids with disabilities who would get left at home. They would get locked in the bedroom while the other kids and parents would go to church, or they wouldn't get sent to school because it sometimes would look maybe like they were a burden on the family, or that the family had maybe been cursed because of this. And what we really wanted people to know is that every life is valuable and every life is worth celebrating. And that's what we did, is that we really celebrated these kids. And to this day, that group still meets and they get together, they go out in the community with these kids. And it was such an amazing thing to see this kind of get legs and take off on its own. I can't, say that I even started this. It just happens that we were there and we were in the same situation. And it's just a group of people sitting together and sharing our experiences. And to me, having God put me there with a child with special needs is how that came to be. Eventually, a couple of years into our time in Uganda, an opportunity came up with an organization called Tutupona. They were looking for someone to do the communications for their international office, and my background is in communications and marketing. And somebody approached me and said, you know what, you should apply for this position. I think you would really love the organization and you would be really passionate about what they do. And so I went and I talked to them and I got the job. And I was really nervous because I hadn't done anything like this. I hadn't stepped outside of kind of the boundaries of stay-at-home mom, and I enjoyed that role. I love being with the kids, but also I have a real passion for people. And Tutupona is an organization. We provide trauma counseling and mental health services for refugees and internally displaced people who have suffered the atrocities of war and conflict. So to step into this role and to see the programs that we run and to see the life-changing moments that some of these people who are living as refugees experience just through, somebody stepping in and caring and somebody listening. When I look at some of the people that I've met and some of the stories I've heard, it really occurs to me that we're all the same. And I've never thought otherwise, but it's so apparent when you hear the story of a mother losing her child, or the story of families being separated, or losing your home, running for your life. Every one of us would react the same in that situation, and it's hard to hear and it's hard to watch, but it's also so amazing to think, like, deep down we're all God's children. And although sometimes we look at situations like this from Canada and we think, like, it seems really far removed and it seems like it's not happening. But to sit with people and hear their stories and then empower them to have a voice and to tell their stories well, and to talk about the healing that they've received through these group programs and this group counseling, it's really amazing. Tutupona is a Swahili word, and it means we will be healed. And to me, the most amazing thing is that in these situations, healing is always a we, that nobody is alone, nobody is isolated anymore. We're in this together. Refugees from the Congo, people from South Sudan, us here in Canada, like, when we say we will be healed, that is a combined effort. It's not something that we can do alone. And so for me to be able to be a part of that, to be able to step in and tell stories and to watch people heal and to watch people be resilient and overcome and start new lives, like, I'm just thankful that I'm able to be a part of that. I wouldn't want to do anything else. I think that we all have a story worth telling. I just want to be able to help people do that. Sometimes living overseas, it wasn't always easy. There are lots of things that are, external stressors that you don't have here. Sometimes even like getting out of my house and getting out of my gate and compound, that there were days where that was overwhelming. It was just, so many things to remember and lock up, and the traffic was bad and the roads were crazy, and, just extra hard things on top of already hard things. I would go to the grocery store some days and there were little girls who were the age of my kids begging outside the grocery stores. And one of the things that impacted me the most living in Uganda was watching our family, be a part of so many things in so many different places. And I don't mean that like, oh, look at us, look at how much we do. I mean, like, our kids just really were able to have compassion and be involved and understand that they are no different than anybody else. In everything we did, they were involved in it, in the special needs group, with the boys who lived behind our back wall. They were like our boys' brothers. And we've been working to be able to bring one of them over here as an international student for a year of school. And so just looking at how our boys have really championed that and have really helped go through the steps and look at how we could make that work. We were able to take Charlotte, or Charlie, our daughter, and work in a baby's home every Tuesday morning as part of her schooling, but just to watch her love on babies who maybe haven't been held for days or cuddled, and have her make sure that every baby was up and having their breakfast. There was one day when we were in there in the morning, and her job was to help serve everybody breakfast, and she noticed that one little girl was missing. And so she wouldn't finish serving the kids until she could find out where this one little girl was. And the little girl was disabled. Her legs were quite severely crippled. And so Charlie went in with one of the nuns who worked at the baby's home, and they went searching until they found that this little girl was still in her bed. And so just to watch Charlie, who most people might think like, oh, maybe she doesn't understand, but she does. And even she sees the value in every person. And I think a lot of that is because of what she's experienced. So to watch our kids be passionate about people like I am, I think that has impacted me more than the work I've done, the experiences, everything. I think that really has driven the idea of being a missionary every day into the hearts of my family. Now that we're back home and I'm working with the Math Canada Home Office, my role here is to continue connecting with people all over the world. And like I mentioned before, that I love to help people tell their stories. And that is what I'm passionate about. And I believe that every story is worth telling. And I know from experience when you're on the field that sometimes things seem overwhelming. And sometimes it's hard to, go back through or relive or even talk about the things that you've been doing, or the things that have happened, or even the really exciting stories. Sometimes at the end of the day, you get home and all of this external stuff has been flying at you all day. And it's just not easy to sit down and tell your story. And my hope is that, as part of the development team here and as part of like the Math Canada Home Office, that I can step in as someone who's been in that position and be like, here, let me help you, because I understand what it's been like, but also I really think you have something important to say. And I really think that there are people who want to hear it. And I really just want to help spread the word and spread the great news of what's happening in math to everyone here in Canada and around the world. So when I was asked to consider coming on with the Canadian head office coming home, not only was I excited because I love the work that MAF does, I think I was most excited because I love the people. So being able to continue connecting with people and talking with people and being involved in the work, even from a distance, it's something that I continue to be really excited about. I think ministries like mine within the ministry of MAF are so important, because there is impact that we don't always see. And I don't mean impact like we're knocking down walls or anything like that, but just the pure fact that there are people who are placed in MAF programs all over the world who are there just like loving on their communities, meeting people where they're at, giving them opportunities, helping them, sharing God's love just through being friends and, interacting, working with other NGOs. there are so many things that happen that we don't always know about because we are where we are. And I think when you look at MAF, the ministries we do with our aircraft are amazing. Like, we go places nobody else could go. But I think the same can probably be said about the non-technical roles that happen within MAF. Like, we go places that it's hard to go. Being in those hard places is where God wants us to be. And yeah, that's why I think it's so important that we all are where we are. I'm really passionate about people and about helping them share their story. I think that everybody's story has value and every person has value. And I think the more I'm able to facilitate, getting those stories and those experiences out there, the more other people can see and value people as well.
If you'd like to learn more about Chaundra and her ministry, there'll be a link in the chat that'll show you how to follow along with her ministry or how to support her as a missionary with MAF. And just a reminder, Chaundra will be here at the end of our live session. So if you have any questions for her that you would like to ask her, please put them in the Q&A now. And then we'll be able to chat and answer those questions at the end of our time together. Our next feature is Helena. She spent the first 18 years of her life in Angola, where her parents served as missionaries. She always felt called to missions, and paired with that, her passion for education. She returned to Angola following university in the USA to restart the international school in Lumbango that she had attended as a child. After returning to Angola, she met her now husband, Brent, an MAF pilot, and now together with their 3 children, they serve with MAF. Over the past years, she has run the K-12 school on the compound passionately, using it as a way to raise passionate, Christ-loving children and being able to reach their families well.
My name is Helena. I am a missionary in Angola. My husband, Brent, is a pilot and program manager here. And I have 3 children. Sienna is 7, Emmeline is 5, and Ezekiel is 3. I grew up in Angola. I'm a 3rd generation missionary kid and a 4th generation missionary. So I guess being a missionary might be in my blood or my DNA. I love working overseas and with kids of any ages and of any background. The word missionary has always just been a way of life for me. Having grown up here on the mission field, my mom used the word missionary, but it was mostly just missionaries do what God has called them to do, and you are a missionary if you are a child of God. Sometimes that means working overseas in different cultures, and sometimes that means staying in North America. But being a missionary is what we're called to do because that means reaching people for Christ. Growing up, I grew up on the compound, and we lived on the compound with other MAF missionaries. And MAF was certainly not an organization that I had any interest in joining growing up. I was always determined to be different from everybody, so I was not going to join MAF, one of those fancy organizations. And then ironically, God changed all that when he had me meet Brent, and we decided to get married, and then it just made it easier to join MAF. So God kind of never say never to God. My favorite thing about being part of math is the fact that they don't narrow their field of vision just to aviation or just to aviation and technology. I've really discovered that math has a much wider vision, and they really are wanting to reach Christ however and whatever that takes. So whether it's through education or technology or aviation or just helping the regular people get along in life, they are willing to go above and beyond for what Christ asks, which I think isn't very common nowadays, and I'm really excited to be part of that. My journey has, as with most people's, I would imagine, has had its ups and downs. I was excited that the Lord called me back to Angola, but living in Angola hasn't, and probably won't ever really be all that easy. And there are days when I wish that I could just go back to North America and have a classroom that is normal. And but then I remember that I'm not particularly normal either. And if I can use the difficult things that have happened to me and my journey to help these kids, because they're not going to be in, just coming to an English school doesn't give them a normal fit anywhere either. And so if I can help them figure out where their place in the world is, then it makes my difficulties more worth it. Personally, I think that children and education, and not just the book education, but honestly helping them figure out how to live life and how to live life how Christ would have them live, I think is foundational to any ministry. And kids, I think kids get lost a lot of the times. And I love that kids are so open and everybody learns differently and they have different strengths and weaknesses. And as a teacher, I want to teach them how to use all of that to grow and connect with other people. And so I think it's important to be able to pour into these kids and show them, no, I will take the time to sit and listen to you. And I will take the time to figure out how to help you grow so that when you leave this place, you can go be an example to Christ, but you will also have the skills to be able to succeed in life. Now, some people, that means that they're math geniuses and they're going to get along, get the highest job out there. Other people, it's just learning how to make change and figuring out how to take care of their family to the best of their ability. I'm not here to create a whole bunch of little geniuses. Honestly, that's never been my goal. I have always felt that school and education is here so that kids can grow to the best of their own abilities. And I think it's important to remind them that even as kids, they're important and God has a plan for them, whether it's brilliance at math or just caring for people. And I enjoy seeing how God uses even these kids in the lives of their parents and the people around them. I would like to see it grow and expand because I feel like it is important to be able to reach more families and more kids and give them an opportunity to learn in an environment where they're supported and loved. But I also want to make sure that our focus is always on what God would have us do and how God wants us to pour into these kids. So if that means that we stay the size we are because that's what we can handle and that's how we can best serve them, then that's what we should do. I have a huge long waiting list for students who would like to get in, and I would love to be able to say yes to all of them. However, because it's only Kelly and I, and we have a few volunteers here and there, that has meant that we can't grow and expand to that extent, and maybe we're not supposed to. So I would say my hope for the school is that it will always be what God wants us to be, and whether that means that we can expand and have a full, 5 classrooms with 5 different teachers, that would be amazing. But if it means that we need to just stay the size we are and pour into the ones we have already, then that's what we want to do. I've always felt that this school is God's, and however He wants to use us, we will be open to that.
Teachers are such an important part of MAF, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. But if you'd like to learn more about Helena and about the school and about their ministry, there'll be a link in the chat to show you how to follow along, or if you would like to support her. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A now so that we can talk about them at the end. And the last feature is myself, Jocelyn Fry. I grew up in Northern Alberta. My husband and I met skydiving in Edmonton, and in 2010 we were married, and we have 2 beautiful children. Nick felt called to MAF, and shortly after we were married, we moved to and lived and served in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where we lived for 9 years, from 2011 to 2020. I'm now serving in the MAF Canada Home Office as the Learning and Development Coordinator, and I'm passionate about equipping and supporting our MAF missionaries. Hi, my name is Jocelyn Fry. I served with my family in the Democratic Republic of Congo for 9 years, and I'm currently serving at the Home Office in Guelph, Ontario. I have 2 kids, Ruth, who is 9, Pascal is 7, and my husband's name is Nick. Growing up, I spent many of my summers attending a Christian horse camp, learning about Jesus in the middle of the Rocky Mountains. It was during my high school years in grade 11 when God really became real in my life. I had learned about God during these weeks in the middle of the mountains, but it didn't really become real in my life. But I remember I came to a time in my life and I was looking for something, and I remember praying one night and saying, God, I really want to be involved in a Bible study. And the next day, a girl in my chemistry class turned to me and invited me to their Bible study. I spent the next few weeks attending their Bible study. Then I started going to the church, and then I started going to the youth group. And it was during that time I really gave my life to Christ. I spent a few years after high school. I attended a discipleship program, and then also went on to helping with hurricane relief. After that, I moved back to Canada, and that is where I met my husband. My husband and I met in 2009. He was already on his way to join MAF. I had just come back from traveling around the United States doing some hurricane relief after Hurricane Ike in Galveston, Texas. And my sister invited me to go skydiving one day. And lo and behold, my pilot that threw me out of the plane that day ended up being my husband. And so one of our very first conversations was, well, if this is going to work, you'd have to be willing to come to Africa. I've always been under the thought and impression that people are people, and deep down we value a lot of the same things. So after Nick threw me out of his plane, we quickly started fundraising together, and then got married. We spent our first year of marriage in Quebec City learning French, preparing to head to the Democratic Republic of Congo. Once we arrived in DRC, a year later, we had our first child, Ruth, and a few years after that, we had our second child, our son, Pascal. The word missionary, before I became a missionary, I think had a different context. When you would think of a missionary, you would think of someone that is spiritually superior or has everything all together. after spending a few years in the Congo and really delving into being a missionary and do I have a right to be a missionary? Do I have my life all together? I came to realize that to some extent the missionary calling is for all Christians, and it is to bring those that are in your realm of influence one step closer to Jesus at a time. I spent a lot of my time as a stay-at-home mom, and I was at home with my kids, isolated in a very large city where it was very difficult to get out. Who I am a missionary to was my kids day to day, was my house workers, my guards around my house, those who would come and ask for food or for money. And it would be my goal as a missionary to just try to be the light of Christ and resting on God's grace and God's mercy and realizing that missionaries aren't any more special than anybody else, but just having that intentionality that is one of the purposes of my life, is to bring people closer to Jesus. As we were preparing to move our lives and our ministry to the DRC, my husband had a specific role, and he was going to be a pilot, and he was going to use those skills to be able to reach isolated people. And that left me thinking, what do I have to give? How does God want to use me in this place? We lived in Kinshasa, which is the capital city of the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is a city of about 14 million people. When we talk in MAF about reaching the isolated, you don't necessarily think about, 14 million people in a city, but we would use the capital as a base and fly out to isolated areas. And as I was thinking and praying before we left, I really felt God put on my heart that he wanted me to focus on our team. And a little bit that made me feel like maybe I was betraying what I had signed up to be as a missionary. But I said, but God, I'm going to be a missionary. I have to get involved in a ministry or to be able to help the Congolese. And God really put on my heart. He said, no, you need to focus on the MAF team there. And that really became a reality soon after we arrived, that my husband became the program manager. And that the program manager role is, in all of our programs, very intense. You have to help run an aviation program. You have to help encourage and work with all of the families. You have to make sure everybody's kids are in school, and organize team meetings as the expatriate staff as well as the national staff. And when my husband took on that job, I knew that my role would be to make sure that my husband was successful in his job. And that may not be the most glamorous thing for a missionary to say or to be able to do, but I knew that my role and the best impact for our ministry as a family in Congo was if my husband was able to be successful in the very difficult role that he took on. And so a big part of my ministry was focusing on how I could help my husband in his role, how I could support him, and also how I could support our team. One of the most amazing times that I had was during one of our annual conferences that I helped plan, and MAF was wanting to use a tool called Strength Finders. And Strength Finders is a great tool to be able to not only learn about yourself, but also the team around you. And we really had a passion to include our national staff in this initiative. And so I was able to take a lot of the material, translate it into French, and then also sit down with each and every one of our national staffs and to be able to go through this assessment with them and to be able to then talk about what that had meant as a team. It was the coolest thing to me to sit down with them, to be able to have them go through this assessment and then have them look at the results and then them go, how did it know? I think sometimes we take so much for granted in North America, where, we take, 5-minute personality tests here and there, but a lot of times our nationals haven't never had that opportunity before. And it was so neat for them to really be able to read about themselves, to read about their strengths, and then us as a team to be able to make sure that we're using we're utilizing our national staff's strengths as they need to be used, as they can be used. Most of them haven't had anywhere close to the same opportunities that we've had, but they're just blessed over and over that some of these people could be working for organizations that pay them more, but a lot of them say over and over again that they work for MAF because they're treated like people, and they're treated like they have skills, and it was so neat and so impactful for me to be able to work with our national staff in that way, and to really be able to incorporate them. It was during those times that I really discovered that I had a passion for equipping people. Whenever I organized these conferences or made these things, I realized that in the depths of my heart, I wanted us to learn together, and I wanted us to grow together. And so I really had this passion of, each time we get together, how can we learn? How can we grow? And how can we do that while we're, cultures apart and languages apart, and there's babies and there's 2-year-olds and there's, our mechanics and pilots and administrative staff. Really became a passion of mine while we were there. Our journey in the DRC took us from arriving, where Nick, my husband, was a pilot, and then he became pilot IT, and then he became pilot program manager, and then just pilot again. And then after 9 years, we came back to Canada. During those times, we had 2 kids. We also had 8 expat families leave and 9 arrive. We had several close national staff friends that passed away. One other missionary, not with MAF, but from a different organization, that died from a mixture of malaria and dengue. And so our time overseas was ripe with instability, not even taking into account the instability of the DRC, and living in Kinshasa. So we felt like God was leading us and transitioning us back to Canada. A big reason for this was myself, that I had taken a few years of our time in Congo, and I had finished my degree in psychology, and I also had taken the 9 years we were in Congo, where I was able to be a stay-at-home mom and to be able to help raise our kids. I had come to a place where I really felt like God was wanting to use the skills that He had grown in me, but in a different location, which is when God put on our hearts to work in the home office here in Guelph in Canada at the MAF Canada office. It was really neat to be able to have conversations with the staff here, and to be able to dream and talk about the opportunities. And it's really cool to be able to come back here and use my experience as a missionary through the education that I have, and to be able to really help equip and encourage and strengthen MAF missionaries all over the world, to be able to make sure that they're successful inside and outside of their ministry, in their lives, in their work, and in all of that. Those are the things that are going to help they're going to help them to be successful. Not just that they can fly well or maintain well, to be able to have a really holistic view of where people are at, or what your people are doing, and I'm really excited to be able to be a part of that. During our years in in Congo, there was lots of times that were really hard. There was lots of transitions that were really hard to be able to have friends move and have friends come and, watch our kids transition through that and try to guide them. Also to be able to help keep our families safe through political unrest. We would often have, we would call them PUD days. We would call them political unrest days where we would all stay home and not drive in the roads because you don't want to get caught in a mob. And it was during those days that you want to make sure the kids are safe, but you also want to make sure that they have a general understanding of what's going on as well. And that's a difficult thing to go through. Whenever we would go through those difficult times, my husband and I would always talk about one of the things that kept us going was just the amazing team that God had placed around us in MAF. It's amazing to see the group of people that God calls into missions. It's a group of people that maybe you wouldn't work with otherwise or hang out with otherwise. And then it's people that you're together on a program with, and you're living and you're working together and really trying to bring God's kingdom to everybody that they can. And everybody has such unique gifts and abilities, and to be able to bring those all together. It was always our team that really kept us going and kept us wanting to support them. And for in the times that they would support us, I think it was a really neat thing to be able to work together as a team to be able to try to accomplish the mission that God had in front of us. In a few different courses and things that I've done, it talks about creating your why and sort of have a purpose statement that gives you direction in each thing that you're doing. And my why that I always come back to is to help our staff, our missionaries, to be successful inside and outside of MAF. Here in North America, we talk about, we have jobs and we have employee improvement and all those sorts of things. And oftentimes missionaries can be sent to the field, and sometimes it is a little bit of out of sight, out of mind. They're working in a program, in an aviation program that they're keeping going. There's program managers that often have an aviation background, but they can't be everything. And here at the Home Office, it's really important to be able to support our missionaries in the ways that they can't necessarily get support where they are. Our missionaries are in the most isolated places around the world. Our missionaries are where they are because they're places of great need. Our missionaries live constantly in times of stress, in times of conflict. Sometimes it's not necessarily large conflict or big things. There's some things about living in third world countries that's sort of just like a water drop, and day after day it can wear people down. And it's really important for us here to go to them and say, what do you need? How can we support you? Here in Canada, I feel very blessed being back here, that life is a lot easier than living overseas. I have a variety of food that I get to eat. Traffic is good. I don't have people asking me for things or for money all the time. I have the capacity to be able to think and plan about things that our missionaries don't necessarily have the capacity to do. And so I'm super passionate, and I feel super blessed to be able to be in a place where I can say to our missionaries and our staff, what do you need and how can I help you to accomplish that? I think it's really cool that I was able to spend 9 years on the field with MAF, and then now I'm able to take that experience back to the Home Office. It's really important when we're working with our missionaries that to some extent we can empathize with
with their lives and to what they do. And though I haven't been to each one of our programs all over the world, or learned the language that they learned or in the culture that they are in, I have that experience of moving my family overseas, having children and bringing them there, incorporating them into a culture, working with a team, supporting my husband in his work, and then also trying to find out where my role is and how I fit. And now I'm able to take all those experiences, those hardships, those difficulties, those joys, and to be able to be here in the home office and look at the MAF world, look wider than an individual program, and to be able to look at a big picture and try to see on how big picture things can be changed. It's important for people with missionary experience to have a say, to have an input on decisions that are made outside of those situations, because decisions can be made on a comfy chair with a cup of coffee on a sunny day in Canada, and not really recognizing that there could be small aspects of that could be very exhausting for our missionaries overseas. So I think it's really neat that I'm able to have that experience, to be able to bring it here, and then to be able to help influence decisions and thought processes and things like that here in the office. Because I strongly believe that if we are able to support and equip and encourage our missionary staff, not only will they be made more successful in the field, but we will be able to retain staff longer. They will be able to, things that may have burnt people out or brought people off the field, if we're able to help equip them as much as we can, not only for at the beginning, but in the beginning and during the middle parts, and also when they leave, that we can honor them for their service and make sure that we help people leave well and transition on to the next part of their lives and the next part of their ministries, which is amazing. People aren't going to stay with MAF forever, and for me, that's totally fine. I want the things that I do today for people to be able to bring on to their next ministry and whatever God has for them next. God isn't only moving in MAF. God is moving in many ministries around the world, and God brings people to places, and then he moves them around to bring great pollination to different ministries or to different things that are going on. And not only to help MAF be better and to help our ministry be better and help reach isolated people, but we want to, it's so important to be able to develop the entire person and our entire missionary families and our MKs, and to be able to make sure that they are equipped and encouraged in each and every stage of their life with MAF, and then also afterwards.
It's a bit odd ending on myself and then coming back to me, but we want to open it up now for a time of question and answer. I think I'll answer the first question. We have a great question from Pat here that says, why would anybody, especially a pilot, jump out of a perfectly safe airplane? And to that, I would say skydiving airplanes aren't necessarily always perfectly safe. MAF airplanes are a little bit more well-maintained than some of the skydiving airplanes that I jumped out of. But my husband did jump out of twice. So that's a great question, and one that we get quite often. I would also like to touch on Helena's story as well. We heard a little bit about her and about her teaching at a school there. And as you know, that MAF's part of MAF's missionaries are teachers as well. And right now we have a critical need for teachers around the MAF world. And I would love if Ray would be able to come on and maybe be able to speak a little bit more about this.
Yeah, it's, for sure, Jocelyn. You know, we've heard that we have many different roles in this series, in addition to pilots and aircraft mechanics, and teachers are one of those important roles. And we've heard from Helena the impact a teacher can have at one of these schools. And some of these schools are small and some are larger. And in order for our families to live and work in these remote places, they need to have access to good quality education for their kids. And this is the main reason why we partner with some key international Christian schools and help them find teaching staff. This is a critical need for our families. And in addition to that need, there are students at these schools from a variety of backgrounds, including faith backgrounds. And so there's some wonderful opportunities there as well. We have partner schools in many of the countries we serve in, and there's always a need for teachers, but there are some critical needs as well. As Helena said, she has a waiting list of students. Some of the more critical needs, we need elementary teachers in the international school in Labongo, Angola, as we heard from Helena. Juba Christian Academy in Juba, South Sudan has a critical need for teachers. Wamana, Papua, various grades at Numanoi, if I said that correctly, I never know how to pronounce that one, but Christian Academy in Highlands, Papua New Guinea. So those are some of our more critical needs. These teaching terms are normally for a one-year commitment, so there's continuity during the school year, but occasionally there are times where there are shorter terms, for example, one semester. Of course, we love it when teachers stay longer. If you're interested in hearing more, first step is to get in touch with me. I can send you a list of opportunities and see if there's something that interests you and see if this is something God is leading you to. And I would say that if you love Jesus, want to have an impact on kids from various backgrounds and culture, and love adventure and travel, this will be perfect for you.
Thanks, Ray. Yeah, as a lot of these schools also have missionary kids that are attending them, and as a mom, I know that becoming a missionary and going overseas, and an important part is knowing that your kids are still going to be taken care of and have a good education. And so I would encourage you, anybody, if there's anyone on the call that is interested, or I would highly encourage any of you to really pray for this, because this is a really critical need that we have right now. And so your prayers would be much appreciated. I have a question here from Rita that said that we came back for me to use my skills, but what is my husband doing? My husband is also serving in the MAF office, just part-time, as a operations projects coordinator, and he's helping out the Angola programs. He was helping them write their manuals, and he's currently doing airstrips and to be able to help with operations. He's also helping with the PATC program, which we have out in Alberta, which is the aviation school. They're looking at building a new hangar, and Nick is helping with that. He's a very great pilot and really great at logistics. Nick is also flying for a medevac company as well, in addition to his MAF role, because he's still a pilot and he still wants to fly. So thanks so much for that question, Rita. I'd love to ask a question of Chaundra if she would like to join us. It was great to hear her story and to be able to just hear your passion for stories. What do you love about sharing stories?
I think what I love the most about it is kind of hearing other people's perspective on situations, but a lot of times, like especially in telling missionary stories and telling the math stories, is that sometimes you become so immersed in what's going on that it's not always easy to talk about it afterwards, or you don't always see it the way someone from Canada might see it in the end. And so to be able to bring the excitement about things that God is doing through our programs back to everyone here in Canada, to me is one way that I can still stay connected, but also it's just another way that I can serve through MAF is to kind of connect that dot, to be the bridge between the field and all of us here in Canada, and say like, hey, look at all of this cool stuff that MAF is doing, and look at all of this stuff that God is doing through the pilots and the engineers and the people like you, Jocelyn, or me, who are on the ground there because MAF is there. Look at the different things that are happening. And yeah, just being able to share that excitement with everyone and give people a voice and spread the news. It's why I love them, and it's why I love what I do now.
Yeah, our pilots and mechanics and our technical staff can be very skilled at their technical aspects, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're always great at putting together a story, which is why we need you. Well, thanks so much for sharing, Chaundra.
No problem.
I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody that has joined us tonight. And if you were able to join us for our last two sessions as well. As you heard from Chaundra, she was one of the main people that helped put together these events, and to be able to help tell these stories and to be able to help the people tell these stories. I also want to thank Nate and Michelle Menard, who put the interviews together and helped with all the technical things. I would love if you came to one of these and you loved hearing about MAF and you would love to hear more about MAF. If you'd like to have an MAF representative connect with you or come and share with your church or your groups that you're a part of, please drop your email in the Q&A box or email events@mafc.org. And we'd love to connect with you to be able to share more about MAF and what it does. And so as we end our time together, I really hope that these 9 stories have encouraged you by the ministry that is happening around the world. And wherever you are today, I'd like to leave you with this benediction. The love of God be the passion in your heart. The joy of God, your strength when times are hard. The presence of God, a peace that overflows. The word of God, the seed that you might sow. Amen. And thank you very much.